Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ben, and in this episode of the Smoking Hot Confessions BBQ podcast, we're talking to a man who has a gift for building barbecue businesses. Hey family, hope you're well wherever you are and you got that thin blue smoke rolling. I am super excited to bring you this episode of the Smoking Hot Confessions BBQ podcast. We have my good friend Joey Machado, who's from Blues Hog BBQ and Gateway Drum Smokers. That's going to be a great chat that's coming up very soon. But before that, I've just got a couple of announcements that I need to run by you. The first is that I'd like to thank our podcast partner Jagged for coming on board for this episode. If you're out there and you're looking at getting a new smoker oven or a new gravity-fed cabinet or something custom built, make sure you go check out Jagged, built out of WA. Jules and Glenn are some of the best people going, and they make some incredible products, so make sure you do check them out. Next, if you're just at the beginning of your barbecue journey and you'd like to know some more information about how to get stuck into it, head on over to SmokingHotConfessions.com. We've got our free ebook over there for you, recently awarded at the NBBQA Conference last year. So head on over there, check that out. It's completely free, SmokingHotConfessions.com. And I'd like to give a big welcome this morning to the people that are joining us for this live recording in the Smoking Hot Confessions barbecue community on Facebook. We're up for about 90 seconds. We've got almost 24 people joining us today. William joined us earlier this morning. He's back again for this one. Big day. This is great. Yes, mate, we've got a couple of great episodes lined up for you today, and I'm really looking forward to bringing them to you. So if you would like to be a part of future live podcast recordings, make sure you jump on over to the Smoking Hot Confessions barbecue community on Facebook. It's a great little barbecue group. It's family friendly. It's all about barbecue, and all the other stuff just gets left at the door. So do come join us. If you're watching this later on YouTube, do give us a thumbs up, a subscribe, and hit that little notification bell. If it's on Facebook, it's all about the likes, the shares, and the comments, particularly the shares. If you're watching it on IGTV, give us one of those cute little love hearts. They're so lovely. And do make sure you give us a 5-star rating and review on a podcast app if you're listening in at a later date. They really help us out, and in the last 30 days, we have been as high as number 6 on the US podcast charts for food and number 3 in the Australian podcast charts for food. So that really helps us out a lot and really helps us get our message out there. Now, as I said, we've got Joey in the wings here. He's waiting to come on out. He does the marketing for Blues Hog and Gateway Drum Smokers. Now, he has a real gift for recognizing strong brands and then turning around and growing those barbecue businesses. And he's also picked up the odd cooking award as well in some IBCA and SCA cook-offs as well. So he's a all-round barbecue guru, I guess. He knows how to cook. He knows how to compete. He knows how to build brands. But I think that's about all the hype up you need from me. Let's get Joey in here.
This is the internationally awarded Smoking Hot Confessions barbecue podcast with your host, Ben Arnott. How long's it been since your last confession?
Joey, long time no see, my friend. How are you today?
Doing well, Ben. It's really, really good to be here. Great to see you. It's been, I don't even know how long it's been since I've seen you.
I can actually tell you the last time that we met in person was the 2019 NBBQA conference in Kansas City. And yeah. I remember that one particularly because we were doing a quick little mini interview on site for the conference. And 30 seconds into the recording, I had got an Amber Alert on my phone and it shut down the whole recording, and we didn't know until we'd finished. And so then we had to do it all again. So that's how I remember that one.
Oh, no. I think last time we were trying to figure out how we were going to collect you and get you to the NBBQA and all that kind of good stuff before all this craziness happened.
That's right. Yeah, I was going to be jumping in your truck with you and going on a bit of a road trip. That was going to be fantastic. But of course, like so many other things last year, it got cancelled. We'll just have to line it up for 2022.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. So, mate, tell me, what was the last thing that you barbecued?
Actually, the last thing that I barbecued was last weekend in, where was I? We were in Belle Chasse, Louisiana, right outside of New Orleans with James Cruse for Hogs for the Cause. And they did whole hog, and we did pork ribs, pork shoulder, you name it, pork, it was made.
Yeah, I love Hogs for the Cause. That's one of my favorite festivals. Now, it moved this year, didn't it? It wasn't at the New Orleans University.
No, they moved this year right outside of New Orleans to Belle Chase, which is just right on the other side of the bridge. And actually, it was a really really neat. Uh, it was in a field. I mean, but it was a cool location. It was just kind of like a fairgrounds, older fairgrounds, I guess it was. And it unfortunately has had around here. It's been raining. Texas, Louisiana, all that. It's been raining for months. And I think we're finally out of it. And it happened to be this last weekend while we were there in New Orleans. It continued to rain. And of course, this was the first live of big venue, I guess, that had really happened in the New Orleans area. For I think they said it was I can't remember how many days they said now, but I mean it's been a long time ever since they shut it down. And so the event got sold out. They had a limited attendance, not as many as they normally did. I think normally they had about 10,000 people that came. And this one, I think they probably had maybe 3,000 people there, maybe a little bit more. But everyone came out. It was raining all day. Everyone had mud boots and had a fun time, and kids were sliding in the mud. And I mean, it was just crazy, but it was really good to see how many people came out. It's a great cause. They raised $2.8 million for children's brain cancer. And they did that I think they planned it in 4 months. And it's basically a 2-day event. And like I said, it was nuts. And if you've never seen the awards for that, we actually live streamed it on the Barbecue League, our channel that we do for Blues Hog. We actually live streamed those awards. You can go back and check them out. But that was probably the most amazing awards I've ever seen. And I've been to a lot of awards, from Jack to Royal to you name it. I've been to all of them. And this one was probably the neatest one.
Yeah, I was really impressed when I was there a couple of years ago, and the Hogs for the Cause, man. There's not much. There's not many causes that are better than raising money for kids with brain cancer. So important stuff there, and yeah, it was just like a huge party. Of course, I was there before all the craziness, so there weren't population caps and stuff, and it was just wild. Right. It was so good.
Well, that's exactly what I told my daughter. I said it just seemed like a big frat party, but there was families there. It was crazy.
And 4 inches of mud.
Yes.
I did actually see the photos of you all standing there with all your barbecue clothes on and repping all the brands, and then these giant rubber boots just covered in mud.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that was definitely what it was. Boots were part of the outfit this past weekend. Today I spent all day cleaning everything. I had Gateway drums that were covered in mud, and all my coolers. Every single thing that I had was in mud. I probably got rid of 20 pounds of mud this morning.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. So what were some of the more interesting sort of different things that people cooked? I remember when I was there was a dessert category, and so you had to make desserts with pork in them, and I saw things like bacon ice cream and things like that. What sort of things did you see?
There was actually everything. So unfortunately they don't really go through, and you're not able to really understand what all the desserts or what all the dishes are. Some people cook savory, some people cook sweet. So they have one that's called pork curry, which is basically, it can be anything. It's just got to have pork in it. Then they have a bacon category. Then they had a mayo category. And then they also had a hot sauce category. And so those things could be technically anything as long as they had that in there. We went savory this year. I made a chicken, spinach, and bacon empanada that was really, really good. And it's just basically a fried pie. And we did a chimichurri on it. I've been spending some time with a friend of mine from Argentina originally, and he's been showing me a lot of this Argentinian style cooking. And I went up there with a sweet version and a savory version. The savory one won with our group, but did not win with the judges. So everything I think was pretty sweet there. And then the pork puree one that we did was actually a pork belly ramen dish that actually was phenomenal. And we wound up six with that one, and that one was really, really good. And after the dust settled or the mud settled, whatever you want to call it, we actually wound up third overall. And so just right outside of, we're almost there. This has been a year of almost. I don't know how many second places I've gotten this year. We wound up third overall at Memphis in May this year. We got second place shoulder, or we got first place shoulder there, but we basically got third overall there at Memphis in May. James and I, James Cruse from Central City Barbecue out of Louisiana, him and I actually went up to New York and cooked at Brisket King, at Pig Beach, and we came in second there. What else did we do? There was all kinds of things that we cooked at this year, and like I said, we were this close.
Yeah, did I see that you did the NYC BBQ competition as well, or
Yep.
was that Pig Beach? Is that the one that you're talking about?
That was Pig Beach. So that
Okay.
one was Brisket King, and that one was a really, really cool event. I'm glad we got to go. We have a good friend of ours who is building pits right now, right outside actually in Luling, Texas, right outside of where I'm at. I'm very central. I'm 30 minutes from Austin, Texas. I'm 30 minutes from San Antonio. I'm an hour from Houston, and I happen to be about 20 minutes from Luling, Texas, which a lot of you guys, y'all may know Luling, Lockhart. That's pretty much the capital of barbecue for us in Texas. And there's a guy there right now who is building some really, really nice offsets, Syntex. And when James and I were going to go up and go cook up at Pig Beach, we had I had to find us a cooker. And so it happened to be Syntex had just sold a cooker up there, 1,000-gallon offset, to a guy there with Brothers Barbecue there in New Jersey. And so he was willing to let us use our pit. So we got up there. We actually beat the pit there. So we got there before the pit got there. The pit got there about 3 hours after we got there. And I took up about a quart of Texas post oak, and we cooked a few cases of Snake River Farmers briskets for that event. And like I said, we turned out, it was a great dish, and we wound up, like I said, second overall. And but it's either way, it was a great event, and we did I think we did Texas a great justice and Louisiana great justice there.
I dare say so, mate. Yeah. So is it common that you will cook on a cooker for the first time at these competitions? Like you guys have just got your processes down so well now, you just roll up and grab anything and cook on it?
It's very common for me to do it because I get kind of thrown into a lot of different situations, and and my mentality is I just make it work. Luckily I'd cooked on Moe's before. So Mo has the same exact pit and some of the other Syntex equipment that he had. So I already knew how they cooked, and I'd already taken some time. And Michael Johnson is the gentleman's name, him and his father, who actually build those pits. And I had spent some time. I had a good 18-hour drive up to New Jersey. And so I spent a lot of time with Michael on the phone, and just basically going, hey, look, walk me through some scenarios, and that type of deal. And we got there. We burned the pit for 1 hour, and then we directly threw briskets on it, and they turned out phenomenal. And but again, like I said, is I think that there's a lot of mentality with a lot of people who really want to take the time and season it correctly, and do all these steps. I've had enough brand new pits in my life that I kind of don't think that there's that much of a difference. As long as you go in there and you're starting your fuels correctly, and you're burning your fuels correctly, and all this other stuff, it's all good. Gateway drums, we clean them after every time that we cook. We completely clean them like brand new. So it's like cooking on a brand new can every single time. Tim Shear and some of these other guys do a lot better job than I do, but for the most part, we take it down to clean every time.
Yeah, right. Those gateway drums are getting just so popular over here as well. What sort of tips do you have for cleaning them out after each competition?
Really and truly, as far as cleaning those pits, normally what I try to do is clean them as quickly as possible, which is very, very difficult for me because normally when I leave somewhere, I don't go directly home. I'm usually headed somewhere else, or I travel during that week, and that stuff never gets out of the van until I get to the next location. Luckily, there's lots of car washes and stuff like that on the way. And honestly, I have a degreaser that I use, spray the cans, shoot them, dry them out as much as possible. We put kitty litter in a lot of them for a couple different reasons. One of the main ones is to soak up grease. Now, and that makes it a lot easier to clean in the bottom of the can. But one of the things is, which I've made the mistake before, is do not use kitty litter that smells. You have to use just regular old kitty litter. And in a lot of places it's actually a material to use to soak up grease. You can buy them at auto parts places and stuff like that. But a lot of times, you'll see that in some of the bottoms of these cans. And the reason why is because you can actually flip a can and that stuff will come right out with the grease in it. But like I said, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely.
Keeping the outside clean is like a whole other story.
Yeah, some of the paintwork looks so good. I don't know that I'd be hitting the outside with degreaser and spraying it down.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now we've mentioned sort of how much you travel around, and your lifestyle would have to be the envy of just about everybody listening or watching to this show. I think you basically your job is to travel to competitions and meet people and promote the companies that you work for. So, give us a bit of an idea of a day in the life. I mean, it all looks like it's this amazing thing. You just sort of show up and party and, all that sort of stuff. Give us an idea of what life is really like.
Well, one of the main things what a lot of people don't understand about what I do is, first off, I don't drink. So I don't party. I hang out with the best of them, but that's really the only way I think I could function, to be real honest, with the schedule that I keep. But honestly, with what I do, it's with this brand and every other brand that I've been involved with is, first off, I treat every brand as if it's my own. Secondly, I try to engage with as many people as possible. And it's not only because I want to do this marketing job, it's because I'm genuinely involved with most of these people. And like I said, I keep in contact with people. I probably spend an hour and a half to 2 hours a day just responding to social media stuff, emails. I probably spend more time on Facebook than I do on answering emails. And I probably should spend more time answering emails. But I honestly, anybody whose birthday it is, or, congratulating them on the cook the past weekend, if they've used our products, we try to appreciate those who appreciate us. And that's part of that's part of it. Whether they're using Blues Hog products or they're using our charcoals or our sauces or our seasonings, or the gateway drums. That's the nice thing now, is I can have a relationship with almost anybody because of the fact that, if you don't use my fuel but you use my sauce, we can be friends. If you use my fuel but you don't use my sauce, we can be friends. If you use my gateway but you don't use my sauce or charcoal, we can still be friends. We're also doing Meet the Pitmaster series that we're doing through the Barbecue League. So I have a videographer, Mark Suarez, who I've actually been working with for a very long time, back since the B&B days. And he's technically kind of working for us, directly in the barbecue realm of things. He's still a freelancer, but, I keep him pretty busy on barbecue stuff. A lot of the places that I go to, Mark gets to come as well. So we have a lot of stuff going on a lot. I do TikTok as well. I think it's very important, to be able to cover all these social media bases. And I discover a lot of people through social media, and a lot of people that we need to spend time with, and a lot of people who, appreciate the brands, because it's not always about the big guys, who've got the hundreds of thousands of views and, and all the credentials and all this other stuff. There's a lot of small guys who actually do a great job in social media and understand how to promote. And, and it's not all about, I meet more people with their hands out, who just want free stuff all the time. And, the guys who are like, oh yeah, you give me something and I'm going to, your brand's going to be the one I push. And I don't like that. I like the guys who go, man, I've been using your stuff for years, and that's the ones who, I lean towards, working with later. And, all these things that I do, again, it's all part of my day, depending on where I'm going, what I'm headed to. We have lots of things that are working in the background. We have these Q events, which are, there's Q in the Loo. I don't think you've ever gone to any of those, have you?
Not Q in the Loo, no.
So Q in the Loo had been a barbecue festival. It's been around a long time. There's a guy named Brian Wabi, who started putting that on a long time ago. And actually, it's one of those events that I met a lot of people in barbecue through. And we started going to those events. And now the Blues Hog brand is going to be heavily involved in that. We're going to be the sauce and the charcoal for those events. And we're also going to vend as Blues Hog there. So we will be in Denver, Colorado. We'll be in Kansas City, Kansas. And then we will be in St. Louis, Missouri. And then Jacksonville, Florida at the end, closer to December. And so those are all things that are going to be happening. One of those overlaps the Royal this year. So I won't go to the Royal this year. I'll do this event instead, but Tim and the whole crew from Blues Hog will be at the Royal this year.
If you're looking for your next barbecue smoker or grill, Jagged Wood Fired has got what you need. Owners Julianne and Glenn are multiple award-winning barbecue competitors who've even traveled to the US to compete at the World Barbecue Championships in Houston, Texas. Based out of Perth and shipping nationwide, Jagged is one of the largest pit builders in the country and has an ever-growing lineup of meat cooking machinery. Not only do they have their now famous smoker ovens, their incredibly efficient gravity-fed cabinets are proving extremely popular in commercial settings, and they also make some of the most stylish asado grills you're ever going to see. Jagged is also well known for amazingly detailed custom work ranging from backyard designs all the way to installations in commercial kitchens. Proudly Australian designed, owned and manufactured, you can find out more at jaggedwoodfired.com.au, spelled J-A-G-R-D. Once again, head to jaggedwoodfired.com.au, spelled J-A-G-R-D, to learn more.
Got a project you'd like to work on with the SHC team? Shoot Ben an email on ben@smokinghotconfessions.com and let's have a conversation.
Alrighty, so I just want to jump back in time now and get to know Joey a little bit better. Man, how did you get started in barbecue? Was it something that you were born with? Did you grow up with barbecue, or did you find it later on in life?
I've always been a marketing guy. I've always been involved in sales and in some sort, and it happened to be at the particular time, I had a friend of mine who opened up an RV dealership in my local hometown. And he was just starting, and he was trying to figure out a way how to get these things. Instead of trying to get people to his place, how could he get his product in front of people? And in our hometown, we always had a fair and rodeo that always had a cook-off involved. And so I had the bright idea of dragging a trailer down to the cook-off and just, setting it there and, just participating in this cook-off thing. And previous to that, I was not a cook. I cooked a little bit at home, but I really wasn't a cook. Now we can kind of backtrack. This was I think it was 22, almost 23 years ago. And so it was some time ago. I'm a lot older than I look. But I had this idea, I had a borrowed pit, offset pit that I borrowed from somebody. I think it maybe had an 18-inch chamber on it. And it was just literally that. I took one brisket, took one rack of ribs and one chicken, and went to go cook this, and beans, because you had to cook beans at that deal. And I went to go cook that cook off. And as soon as I got there, I realized that it was a very, very social event. And it was more, at that time, it was more about the camaraderie and, hanging out and drinking and, that type of deal. And so before you knew it, I never even lit a fire. I didn't do anything, but I drank all night long. And it was already getting to be morning time. And I was, needless to say, I didn't turn in anything. And I had a great time. I got to understand a little bit more what cook-offs were. But we did make some sales, so that was all that mattered. And but after that, the following year, I found it interesting enough that I wanted to go back. And I put some equipment together and I did some practicing, and we went and cooked. And honestly, I cooked for like 5 years at that one event. Never won anything, nothing, but had a great time every year. And in that whole time, I was probably freshly married. My wife and I had been together for a while, and we were just fixing to have some kids, and we had kids, and but I still wanted to go and kind of have a good time more than cook type of deal. And we did it for a while till the kids were about 5 or 6 or so. And then at that point, I got a little bit more serious, and was tired of partying and just wanted to go and really compete, and started paying more attention. And that's when we started to actually, do well. And then it just kind of progressed, on from there. I went into some oil field sales. And at that time, part of the oil field sales job was I would actually go and cook for all my clients out in the field. And at that time, Texas Oilman was just off the hook in Texas. And so, I was literally going and cooking almost every day for customers out in the field. And so my cooking skills improved. I had an excuse to buy bigger rigs. I bought a big old 28-foot enclosed trailer that was basically a big catering rig, I say I bought it. I actually bought the shell of the trailer, and I actually built it out, built the pit on it, built everything. And we used that for a couple of years and competed, and then figured out that was, we really wanted to push it harder. And we got more and more serious. As we got more serious, the brand, the B&B brand, was a local charcoal to us, literally 40 minutes from me, from my house. And as we competed more and more, we understood how expensive it was to do it without sponsors and without, everybody else, if you wanted to go cook every weekend. And in Texas, you can literally cook every weekend, except for Thanksgiving and Christmas. You can pretty much cook every weekend if you want to. And so we continued on cooking. I pursued this brand to try to see if I could get them. I had picked up another guy out of Austin, Uncle Bob's Country Seasoning, who, he was my seasoning sponsor. I had some friends that had meat markets that were kind of, they weren't giving me product, but they were hooking me up with some good deals. And so, before you knew it, I had like 5 or 6 stickers on my trailer. And, and I was like rolling hard. I was sponsored up. I had a cooler dealer. I had all kinds of people. And really, and that's what it kind of got me, because then I was like, okay, I'm out here and all I'm doing is marketing for all these brands, so I said, I need to figure out how I can make this work for me. And so I pursued B&B, and I finally met the owner, and I convinced him that, this was going to be the best thing for him ever. And, got him talked into, giving me like 1 pallet of mixed fuel, everything from wood to, you name it, I had it. I didn't care what it was. I had it. And we put it out proudly in front of the trailer every weekend. And before you knew it, I started to understand the market a lot better. And there was a company out there that was called Western Wood Products, and they still are out there today. And at the time, Western Wood was, in the Texas barbecue scene, they were it. If you were recognized by that brand, you were something, because they would come out and bring a big 30-foot rig, and they would have huge parties, and they would really entertain for the cooks. But it was a certain cook that they entertained for. So it wasn't everybody. They would kind of go around and hand select. Oh yeah, you can kind of come to the party. You can come to the party.
VIP parties.
Exactly. And it was the guys who got the calls. Those were the guys that got invited to the parties. And so as I kind of noticed that more and more, I kind of understood, what it took to kind of be part of that. And then all of a sudden, here I am, pushing the brand for B&B. I am, I'm kind of doing, out there just kind of competing on my own, trying to make a name for myself. And this is back in the day. I'm cooking right next to Ernest Cervantes. I'm cooking right next to all these guys who are something in Texas barbecue today. But at that time, we were all the same guy. We were just all struggling, trying to not burn chicken. And so eventually what happened was the Western Wood Products all of a sudden sold out to Duraflame. Duraflame bought them. Duraflame's a huge corporate company here. As soon as they bought them, hospitality stopped. Cold turkey.
Ooh.
And so all of a sudden, all these guys who had been really getting taken care of by the Western brands, that just went away. And so right over, at that, I think it was the same week they sold out. And it happened to be because I knew one of the guys, the family who actually owned Western Woods. He's the one who kind of confided in me. Oh yeah, we're selling out, and it's kind of over, and this type of deal. And so I approached the owner of B&B, and I said, hey, look, here's a great opportunity around the corner. I said, are you ready to grow this company? And they'd never really had a sales guy before, and he was like, well, what's it going to take? I said, I have no clue. But I can guarantee you that in a year, we can double your numbers. And then we went ahead, we made an agreement. I started going, I didn't quit my job yet. I was still doing oil field sales. And then I started going, doing trade shows for him for free, just to go do stuff, to be more involved with the brand. And then pretty much, within about 6 months, he brought me on. I just told him what he was going to, what I needed to live, basically. And we just kind of made an agreement, and I went to work, and and he was like, what are you going to do? And I said, I really don't know. I said, but we're going to figure it out, and it was kind of one of those deals, I just started going and promoting the brand harder and putting product in people's hands. And I think within that first month or two, I think, we had a NBBQA meeting. I went and became members of NBBQA, met everybody at NBBQA. Memphis in May was right around the corner. I loaded up a whole trailer full of stuff and just showed up at Memphis in May. I didn't even know anybody. I knew teams that were going to be there, but I didn't have an invite. Nobody knew I was coming. I just pulled up to the gate and said, I have charcoal for teams. And they just kind of let me in. And I just started going around and just leaving charcoal at all the different, spots. And I think literally, I think that was the first time B&B had ever been outside of Texas. And from that point on, I wound up at every event, the Royal, Memphis in May, the Jack, barbecue festivals, Chicago, DC, you name it. I was at all of them. And what it kept happening was I would see the same people at all these events, and they never questioned it, So, I was just basically sliding in and, doing my deal. I'd never pay to be there, nothing. And so I kind of built this name of just being this guerrilla marketing guy who, if you saw this dude roll up, just respect to him, let him in, whatever. And and that's really how I built that brand is, I paid attention, latched on to good people, good key people, the people who really meant something in the barbecue community, but I also got very, very involved. So I was board member with NBBQA. Every event that people would ask me if I could, I'd say yes. And then I'd figure it out later, type of deal. We weren't a company that we could give you $10,000 for an event, but I could give you a couple grand worth of charcoal, and so we kind of built relationships that way. Before I knew it, I had guys like Darren Cosmo, I had Mo Cason, Mark Lambert, I had the Boards Night Out boys. I had at one point I had Heath Riles and I had Malcolm Reed. I had all these guys that were, basically doing stuff for me, not because that I was paying these guys. It's because that they respected my hustle and I respected these guys. And, they wanted me to support them. And and again, all I asked them to do was support me. And so it went on like that for a while. I had Saffron Hodgson work for me for a while as well. Just talked to her actually the other day. And, as things progressed and we grew and we started selling more and more and more and more, the cart started getting way in front of the horse. And so there were some questions that started rising for me, on, how can we continue at this pace, type of deal. We've done a great job at growing, but at the same time growing, we weren't finishing, so we would start working with someone and then, we weren't even halfway during the relationship. And then, they want to bring somebody else in and then they want to bring somebody else in. And as far as, retail stores and big chain stuff, and I'm a big guy on relationships. So I believe if I came with you, I'm going to leave with you, type of deal is I don't believe in going, oh yeah, well, even though I'm doing business with you, I want to do business with you, even though none of y'all can get along. That doesn't work for me. And so when I saw things going kind of sideways, that's when we kind of agreed to disagree and I left B&B basically. And, from that point I had a small hiatus, and striked up a conversation with Sebastian Bissert with Fogo Charcoal. And Sebastian was a great guy, great product. And at the same time, I had a relationship that we had kind of started with Tim Shear. And Tim was a great guy, really loved what he was doing. It seemed like everything he touched turned to gold in the barbecue world. And at the time, Tim wasn't ready for me. Sebastian was. And and I just told Sebastian, I'd love to come and help you, but I can't guarantee you I'm gonna stay here. I don't know if this is gonna last forever, whatever. And sure enough, I got there. I made some great introductions to the Fogo Charcoal brand, to a lot of great people in Texas and abroad. And then I think it was 6 months into it, and Tim goes, "Okay, I'm ready now." I was like, "Well, okay," and we had a conversation with Sebastian. He totally understood, and there was a lot of things that I wanted to do that he wasn't ready to do yet. And Tim was. And so, I went ahead and I just bit the bullet. But the good thing is we left, on really great terms. I still talk to Sebastian all the time. A lot of the guys who were his brand ambassadors were my brand ambassadors when I was with B&B. When I left B&B, I had a lot of guys who were waiting in the wings going, okay, what do we do now? You're not there. I was like, well, I said, it's kind of one of those deals. If you want to hang on, hang on. If you want to follow me, I don't know where I'm going, so, I had a few guys that I put on the Fogo deal, and I have a few guys who waited in the wings and they're still following me today. And, I've never been a guy who's a pay to play guy. So, I don't like, I like to make relationships, but I don't like to pay ambassadors. I'm going to pay you for your time. And if you're earning us money, there's no reason for me to, take your time without, reimbursing you type of deal. Let's not use reimburse. let's say pay you for your time type of thing. Um, but there's a lot of programs that have started that is pay to play programs. You do this and then I'll send you some money back later. That doesn't work for me. I could never work for anyone that said, yeah, you spend all your money on your credit card and then you send me the receipts and then I'll pay you whenever I want to, type of deal. That doesn't work for me, there's a lot of people who got kind of swindled into that deal to where, they're like, oh yeah, you do all this stuff for us and then we'll pay you later, and again, like I said, it doesn't work. People are, I know that there's so many more people who are in a competitive world today, and everybody wants to have all those stickers on their trailer and they want to have, they want to have all this recognition and, because a lot of people think the more brands that you have on your trailer is the more successful you are. And you can take a look at the most successful people in barbecue. Most of those guys only have their name on the trailer, so you have to remember that in the back of your head that, it's brands don't help you grow. Now they can ease the pain, when you're, going to buy everything every weekend. But again, like I said, it's kind of one of those deals that I don't want people to think that you have to have a ton of sponsors, or, stuff like that. Promote the stuff that you use that helps you win, that you don't mind buying, because that's the main thing is if you're using a inferior product because you get it for free, but it still doesn't give you the results that you really, really want, or if you're putting this free product out front, but you're actually cooking with something else. I see that all the time. It's not worth it because guess what? Your neighbors know what you're doing. Everybody else knows what you're doing. But that's kind of what I see in this whole game and the way that we're trying to promote this, the Blues Hog brands and gateway brands right now. Drum smokers, for example, right now in Texas, we got 15 guys who are all making drum smokers. Do they all cook the same? No, they don't all cook the same. They all cook way different. The one that I have cooks extremely good, and you don't have to babysit it. You don't have to put fans on it. You don't have to do anything. But I still have people who put fans on them. I still have people who, do all these other things that you really don't have to. And then there's some people who have drums that's the only way they run is with fans and, everything else. But I'm still one of those guys that, if you get outside of Texas, you go to KCBS, you go to any of these other events anywhere else that's heavily dominated by KCBS, you're going to see a ton of gateways. The reason why you see a ton of gateways is because they work exactly like they say they are. That's why we have guys who come from Australia who can make a phone call and say, hey, can I have a gateway or two when I come over there to cook on? Perfect. You don't have to test cook that. It's going to cook this just like the one you had at home. And that's kind of one of the nice things for us is, Tim Shears built a great name for himself in the industry. He's a winner. He's a champion. He's done everything else, but he's probably one of the most humble guys that you'll ever meet. The only problem is Tim's not a guy who's going to go way out of his way to go and meet every single person. But if you go up and approach Tim, he's going to be more than happy to sit there, talk to you. He's got an open door policy. If you see his trailer there and you want to go ask him something and he's right in the middle of turn in, he's not one of those guys who goes, no, get out of here. I can't deal with you until after this. He'll take the time to talk to you. And that's one of the nicest things about Tim and, the whole mentality that he has is he's one of the most laid back cookers ever. And he's got great success. He's a simple cooker. He doesn't make things super complicated. So if you want to win from someone or learn from someone who wins, that's one of the guys to pay attention to, and it's easy to tweak everything. But it's my first experience that I ever had with KCBS. There's a guy, his name's Lance Moore, and he's actually West Texas Pitmasters, and he's out in Plainview, Texas. And I went up to a Sam's event one weekend. I was tagging around with Matt and Sarah Walker with Boomerang Barbecue, and I wanted to learn KCBS, and he was there. and he didn't have, nobody was with him. He was by himself. So I just introduced myself and said, hey, I'd love to learn KCBS. And, do you need, I saw you didn't have anybody with you. Can I help you? He's like, yeah, come on, get in and try to, do whatever. And I tell you what, that guy, he changed my whole mentality of cooking, because I had these complex processes and sauces and seasonings and injections. And when I left him, I had everything on one sheet of paper for every category. And the whole sheet of paper wasn't even filled up, and luckily that guy showed me, Lance was the one who really showed me how you can make great barbecue very simply, which a lot of people don't like to hear, because, they want to have 15 different products in their recipes. But his deal was very, very simple. Luckily, I have a son, Ty, who's been very successful in barbecue as well. And I took everything that Lance taught me is exactly what I gave to my son. And I told him to strip it down. And I told him to cook super simple, and, and cook the way, if you don't like the way it tastes, then nobody's going to like the way you taste. And that's kind of where we got. And I said, and if judges don't like it, it just means that they're not a good judge. So my thing is, I do two things. You either have a good cook or you have terrible judges. That's the way I look at every single cook, and I'm not going to go and change my recipes every single time that I have a stinker at a cook-off. And that's kind of one of my theories. If I go and cook and I cook 3 cook-offs using the same exact recipes, and I do good at 2 and I tank at 1, I'm going to continue to cook it. If I tank all 3 times, then I'll tweak. But other than that, I leave alone.
You're listening to the internationally awarded Smoking Hot Confessions podcast with massive barbecue nerd Ben Arnott.
Alrighty, Joey. Now, this is the third segment of our show. This is the part that is the guests' lesson or tips for the viewers and the listeners. And if you are joining us live, this is the time to start popping your questions for Joey into the comments, and I'll put them to him after he's finished sharing some wisdom with us. Now, mate, you want to talk to us about tips and tricks for promoting promoting a brand. So I'm going to throw it over to you, and you can impart some wisdom on us.
And I think that we've probably covered a little bit of that in previous conversations, but probably one of the main things is, what we saw, especially during this hard time that we're coming out of, we saw a lot of people who came up with new brands, and there's a lot of people who just decided to make their own products and take a leap of faith into this barbecue world. First and foremost, I want to say, congratulations, because this was the time to do it. The one thing that you have to understand is there's 2 schools of thought in the barbecue world. The number one is, if you have a small brand and it's a small batch brand and you're making it in your kitchen, or if you're making it, however you're going to do it, you're making less than a pallet when you're doing this product. You have to understand the value of your product. Because I know I've done it. It took me, $60 to make 1 bottle of sauce. By the time that I bought, so-and-so's, glaze and this sauce and that sauce, and put them all together to create my own product. So you have to be very thoughtful as you're going through this process to make sure that you can make something that people can afford, and something that you can afford to make, and something that will have a little bit of shelf life. The other thing that I want to say is, once you have a good product and you find people who can honestly give you their opinions on the product, because a lot of times when you take a product and you go and give it to somebody and they're going to, oh yeah, I love it. It was great. It was perfect. Guess what? They didn't spend their money on it. They didn't make any investment in it. So it's like it's your family barbecue. You have the best barbecue every single time your family's there, and then later on when they go home, maybe it may change. I don't know. But I mean, the thing is, you have to understand is you're not going to get a totally unbiased opinion every single time that you put something in front of someone. So it's always good to just get some very random people that you know is competitive or whatever, if that's what your intention is, and get that product out to those people and let them honestly judge your product. And then you have to understand too is, when you taste the seasoning right out of the bottle, it's way different once it's cooked. It's way different once you cook it on beef or once you cook it on chicken or once you cook it on an emu, whatever you're going to cook it on. Um, the flavor palette changes so much. And so you have to have a lot of direction for people to understand how to use your product. That's one of the things that a lot of people don't get. And it's one of the things that I'm actually working on right now is working with a lot of independent guys to really get the product story out, because just because it's a barbecue rub, you get it and you're going to use it. You may not use it for that intended purpose or how they expected you to use that product. We're barbecue guys. We don't read instructions. We don't do any of that. We use it the way that we think it's supposed to be used. And then if it works, perfect. If it doesn't, you go, oh no, that stuff's no good. So the thing is once you have a product out there and people receive it well, then you have to find good partners to be able to sell your product. Now, in today's age, all you need is social media and a fulfillment. So whether you're doing it that at home, you're paying your kids to do it, whoever's going to do it, everything costs. Nickels add up to dollars. So what you wind up having is you have to figure out, how much is it going to cost to ship? How much is that bottle? If I can't get that bottle cap today, what am I going to use if I don't have it? Once I get to X amount of dollars, do I have to start claiming this on my taxes? You have to figure out the ins and out of this type of stuff. You want to go sell it on the weekends, whatever. The barbecue in sauce and seasoning industry is very, 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 very inundated and very hard. You're going to have, what you find is you'll see a lot of people who will flock to one thing and then another. So if somebody has a little bit of success here on this one product, this one time, and you happen to put it on social media, then all of a sudden it's going to sell well. You got to remember, 5 years ago, nobody shared anything that they did. You couldn't even get in a trailer. You couldn't see what they were doing. It was very, very, very secretive. Nowadays, everybody wants you to know what they're doing. So, the times have changed so much. Even what we're doing with Barbecue League right now is we actually get invitations to guys at contests. They go, oh, will you come and film me doing my box turn in? Man, 5 years ago, we couldn't do that. Nobody, they didn't want you to see nothing, but again, like I said, is now it's so easy for you to get on and make a success story, but it's also very easy for you to determine whether you want to go down this road and make this investment, because it can be a crazy, crazy investment. And you have to decide, are you a businessman for barbecue or are you a competition guy for barbecue? There's few guys who make it work. Bill Purvis is a great example right now. Bill Purvis is very successful. He just launched his seasoning line. And guess what? His success is pushing that seasoning. Now, once the people get that seasoning in their hands, and if they can experience the same success that he's having, they're going to continue to buy the product. Now, again, Fred Robles, he just launched the line just this week as well. Again, success tends to follow some of these people who immediately are going to be successful. Sell a case, sell a pallet, right off the bat. Remember, don't get discouraged. If you believe in your product and it's a good product and you have people who will give you good, honest opinions on it, pursue it. Figure out the way that you can make the most money on it. The way you're going to make the most money on it is if you sell it yourself. Other than that, like I said, is you can go put it in a shop and consign it and, see if it sells in a month, and then they'll pay you a little bit back or, whatever. But like I said, if it's a passion, pursue it. If it's a passing, it's a passing, but like I said, it helps to be a little successful in what you're doing. If you're not successful, find somebody who is to help you make it successful. Pretty simple.
Yeah, good, man. That's some great advice there. Beautiful. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to say that now's probably a good time for us to start wrapping this up, bringing the interview to an end. So I'm going to throw the studio over to you now. Give some thanks, give some praise, give some shout outs to people that have helped you out along the way, and make sure you tell everybody where they can track you down on the internet.
Sure. I tell you, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this time being here. I look forward to seeing you and our Australian friends this year, hopefully. I know that, everything is coming. We're right around the corner from everything. So hopefully, everyone will get an opportunity to come see us, and a lot of us will get a chance to go see you. And, one of the other things, right now is, luckily for me, the Blues Hog and Gateway brands treat me extremely well. That is, who I work for on a daily, and that's what I do. So if you need Blues Hog products or Gateway products, please let us know, and we'll make sure we find your retailer close, or you can always order them directly from us and we'll get them there. The other thing that I wanted to say is, we do work with other brands right now, promotional wise, for the barbecue league and that, and it's like Yeti, and work with Tito's Vodka. I work with Topo Chico, work with Gunther Wilhelm Knives. I got a sporty little knife case. He's not supporting me, but I got Maka, who's got me a cool knife roll that goes with me everywhere I go, and I promote it as much as I can. But other than that, barbecue family is barbecue family. I've been blessed to know just about everybody there is in this barbecue world. And I'm always looking for more friends. And like I said, if you ever see me anywhere and you need some help or support, please feel free to reach out. I'm kind of a fixer in the barbecue world. If I don't have it, I probably know who does. And we can always, it's all about relationships and, growing great relationships in here. I try to keep a good name in the industry. And it's one of those things. If you stick with good people in the industry, good things happen to you.
Absolutely, man. Definitely. Look, thank you very much for your time, and I'm going to wish you all the best of luck with your future endeavors, and I look forward to seeing your next adventure and road trip with James Cruse.
Yes, me too. I don't know where that's going to lead, but like I said, we got lots of crazy things coming up in the future.
And there you have it, folks. That was Joey Machado from, wow, so many things. Blues Hog, Gateway Drum Smokers. He was just mentioning he's doing some work with Yeti as well. I mean, and how good were those words of wisdom about how to grow your own brand and to represent your own brand? That was, there's a lot of gold in there. A lot of good stuff. Okay, so now before I do let you go for the day, just to remind you of the announcements from the top. Huge thanks to our podcast partner Jagged for helping us bring you this episode today. I know that Joey and Jules get along well. They met when they were over in Houston as well, so there's a bit of a personal connection there, which is nice as well. Which is what Joey was talking about, making those personal network connections. So do check them out. They build some great smokers. The other thing is, if you're just at the start of your journey, head to SmokingHotConfessions.com, grab your ebook, come join us on the Smoking Hot Confessions barbecue community on Facebook, and then you too can be a part of these live podcast recordings. And forgetting one, of course, all the social media stuff. Joey was just talking about how important all that was, and I just plumb forgot it at the end of the show. So the social media stuff, the likes, the shares, the comments, the ratings and reviews, anything you do to help us out, we would really appreciate it, and we would love you forever. So until next time, take care of each other and keep on queuing.
Thanks for listening to the Smoking Hot Confessions podcast. Head on over to SmokingHotConfessions.com for recipes, tips, and Ben's own confessions.